Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Wells, Director of College Relations here at MEFA. Welcome to today's webinar, What to Know About Financial Aid Appeals. We're gonna introduce our panel in a second, but before we get started, just want to let you know we are recording today's webinar. So I have been at MEFA for, almost 24 years. It'll be 24 years next month. So nearing on that quarter of a decade. And I'll be moderating our webinar today, asking questions of the panel. I also have a couple of my colleagues behind the scenes, Meredith Clement and Jennifer Bento-Pinion, who are going to be doing the Q&A behind the scenes. So feel free to type the questions in the Q&A, but just know that we have a list of great questions that you're probably going to be asking that the panel is going to address. So we might hold off until we get to that question, but just know that we will get everybody's questions answered. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our panel just to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their college or university, and I'll start with Sherry Avery, who's right there at the top.
Hi, thank you so much for coming today and for having me. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Student Financial Services at Brandeis University, which is a four-year private institution that meets 100% of financial need for our students. And I am entering or almost up to my 30th year in financial aid this summer, and all of which has actually been at Brandeis.
And I've known you almost that whole time. Kevin DeRusi from Salem State.
Hi, thank you for joining us today. My name is Kevin DeRusi. I'm the Associate Director of Financial Aid here at Salem State. I've been at Salem State 20 years this year and been in financial aid about 25 years total. And my role here is mostly working with our special population compliance and special programs.
Excellent. And Ken.
Thanks, Stephanie. Hi, I'm Ken Ferreira. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Student Financial Services at Suffolk University. We are in the Beacon Hill area of Boston. We are also a four-year private, and I believe that this is my 26th year professionally in student financial aid.
Excellent. And Alcira, last but not least.
Hello, thank you for joining us. My name is, again, Alcira Zadroga. I work at Fitchburg State. I am the Associate Director there, one of the Associate Directors here. We are a four-year public school, and all of our counselors work with all students, graduate and undergraduate students.
Excellent. Great. So I just want to let everybody know that all the registrants are on mute. So if you have a question, please put that in the Q&A, and we will get to those questions as we go through the webinar. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the slides and start with our questions. Okay, so I'm going to start with you, Ken, with a very basic question, but very important question to start off. What exactly is a financial aid appeal?
Yeah, on the very elementary explanation, it is a request of the financial aid office or the student financial services office at the school or schools that you're applying to for additional financial assistance. You are appealing for additional financial aid.
Excellent. All right, so with that, I'm going to talk. Let's talk about why some families have reasons for appeals, and I think everybody will be able to contribute to this. So I'll start with you, Kevin. What are some of the reasons, specifically at Salem State, and in your experience, that some families might need to appeal their financial aid offer?
Sure. The most basic common reason that families appeal is a decrease in earnings in the household. So because each year's aid is based on tax information from 2 years prior, a lot can change in 2 years. So your financial aid for the upcoming school year may not reflect where your family actually is financially. So that's first and foremost the primary reasons we see here at Salem State is there has been a decrease in the family's income.
Excellent. Sherry, do you have what are the appeals you commonly see at Brandeis?
Yeah, so definitely income changes is the biggest one. But another big one we see is unreimbursed medical or dental expenses. So maybe there was a big surgery or a big dental procedure or something like that. It could be ongoing too, like maybe a parent is going through cancer or some kind of treatment. So we're able to consider some of those expenses because they affect the family's ability to pay for college.
And how about you, Sarah? Anything unique that you might see at Fitchburg State?
I agree with the answers that have been given as well. But things like maybe like a laptop purchase could be one, or even we sometimes see even like a general appeal. I can't come up with this balance. Is there anything else that the school can help me out with? That type of thing. And some families actually ask about an appeal on a merit award sometimes as well.
Yep. So that's something great that we'll talk about too, is the difference between a merit award appeal that might be through the admissions office and need-based appeal. How about you, Ken? Any other things that you've seen that folks might not really think of as an appeal, but they should get in touch with your office about?
Yeah, some appeals are really a request, and I think that this might address a question that I just saw come in through the chat. They're asking for a second look, based on their admission application. They may send updated grades, and they may have received the original financial aid offer, but are asking if there's any additional sources that may have surfaced for the student to now be eligible for.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I do like that question that came in. And I think the participant asked, why wouldn't everybody appeal? And sometimes there's just not necessarily a reason for it, but it never hurts to ask, right? It never hurts to ask, even if it's just to understand why and how the numbers came up to be the way they are. That's great. Okay, so what happens if a family, I'll start with you, Kevin, and particularly with Salem State and Fitchburg State on the line, this will definitely come into play with common colleges that cost about the same. Why would financial aid offers differ so much from school to school? Is it the type, the cost, especially if it's Salem State and Fitchburg State? What would you recommend families do if they see a big difference?
Well, as a state university, we rely heavily on state funding for a lot of our financial aid programs. And the Massachusetts Department of Education, they kind of divvy up the funds based on the school's enrollment, the overall number of students attending. So even though Salem State and Fitchburg are similar in size, and maybe not so much in size, but in cost and population, I believe Fitchburg actually has some additional students that we don't have. So their enrollment numbers are higher. So Fitchburg may be receiving more state funds in certain grants than Salem State would receive, and vice versa.
Right. And we're, just for the folks on the line, we're really focused right now on the need-based aid, not so much merit, but we will talk about merit-based aid, which really is really more about, the students' GPAs, test scores, that kind of thing. That's really more through admissions, but we will definitely talk about that. What about you, Ken? Do you have any guidance on, differences, especially between private colleges, those that meet full need, those that don't? There's a much bigger difference in cost and maybe even financial aid offers. Do you want to address that for private colleges?
Yeah, so a four-year private is using sources of institutional aid that really fall into predominantly, I think, two buckets, right? So the first bucket is merit-based aid that is awarded to the student typically at or close to the time of admission. And then the second bucket is need-based aid, which is usually when the family has submitted the financial aid application. So at a minimum, the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. And that the institution's funds are then bundled with any state and federal funds that the student qualifies for, and it is reflected on a comprehensive financial aid offer that lists all of those sources of financial assistance. And so in terms of process, if there is a significant change in the family circumstances, they may have, depending on the private institution, they may have you go through the typical process without documenting those changes, and then work with you after you are awarded the first pass of financial assistance to then document that change of financial circumstances and then revise the aid offer based on what you're able to document in terms of, let's say it's a loss of income. In my experience, a school typically will want at a minimum what the situation of the family is reflected on the first FAFSA, so the first free application for federal student aid or the first financial aid application. And then if there are changes that need to be made based on circumstances the FAFSA doesn't capture, that those are secondary in the process. Does that make sense? Did I answer that?
Yeah, that's great. And Sherry, you use the CSS profile at Brandeis, which gathers even more information. So can you talk to us about, the difference between a school might use the profile and the FAFSA versus just the FAFSA and how that might affect things?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of private institutions who have a significant amount of scholarship money to give out may also ask for the profile in addition to the FAFSA. As you may know, every school in the country needs the FAFSA for federal and state aid processing. So the private institutions may ask for the profile, which asks for more information like, for example, home equity information, which is not on the FAFSA. So it gets a little bit more in depth with the family's financial circumstances than the FAFSA does, so that we can determine what we think the family can afford. And so you might think then that all of the offers from all the private schools will be the same, but they won't, because every school has a different interpretation of what formula they want to use for their own scholarship funds. Even if they get the profile, they may use the profile differently. And also each school has a different amount of money that they're able to give out. So there'll be institutions like Brandeis that meet 100% of financial need, but not every school is able to do that. So there might be a private school that knows that you need 20,000, but they're only able to give you 15 because that's the limitation of their funding. So you will see dramatic differences even between private institutions in terms of how much money you may get.
Yeah, and I would go on to say that most colleges cannot meet 100% of needs. So we will talk towards the end about how to fill in the gap. We've already gotten that question in the chat I saw, so that's a very important question. We will definitely be covering that for sure. So Sherry, while we're chatting with you, if you want to kick us off, I'm going to have everybody speak to this. Talk to us about the process at Brandeis if someone wants to appeal a financial aid offer. When do they do it? What do they need? Because different schools do it a little bit differently.
Yep. So the first step is to actually get your initial financial aid package, which may come at the time of admission, might come a little bit after, depending on the school. So once you have that in hand and you've evaluated, maybe you've decided or determined you cannot afford that. So the next step would be to contact the financial aid office. It's never a bad idea to have a conversation with a financial aid counselor before you submit an appeal. I'm sure every school has their own appeal website with the steps, but it might be good before you go through all the steps to find out whether it might make a difference for you to do all that work. So starting with a conversation with a financial aid counselor, I think it's a good idea. If they recommend that it might be worthwhile for you to do an appeal, likely next steps, there might be an appeal form. So Brandeis has an appeal form with lots of different questions to guide you through the different kinds of things that might be considered and what documentation would be required. Some schools, you can just write a letter and that's fine, or an email or something like that. So it depends on the school, but colleges may very well ask for more information. They may now ask to see your tax return. They might ask for other kinds of verification documents. For example, if you're appealing based on medical, you'll have to provide some documentation of the medical benefits or whatever the special circumstance is.
Excellent. And Kevin, how does it work at Salem State? When do you want to hear from families?
Typically, we release our appeal form April 1st, around that time. It's available on our website. Simple form to fill out with student's name, ID number, the reason for the appeal, and the form allows parents and students to actually attach documentation. So we do request at the time of filing an appeal that you submit the tax returns from the FAFSA year. So if you're appealing for 25, 26, we're going to ask you to attach your 23 federal tax returns just to get those right off the bat so that we're not dragging along the process. Once we receive those, we reach out usually 3 to 5 business days to let you know if we need any additional documentation, and we'll request it at that point. We receive that, probably about another 3 weeks. We try to do a quick turnaround, especially for our incoming class, because we know, decision deadline is May 1st. So we want to make sure that you have a full picture of what your finances look like at Salem State. Usually about 2 to 3 weeks after submitting everything, you'll get a response.
Excellent. And Ken, how do things differ? How do things work at Suffolk?
Yeah, so if I could just piggyback some of Sherry's comments, I can't overstate enough to reach out to the financial aid office or the student financial services office and work with a financial aid counselor. Most schools will have a designated financial aid counselor that is assigned to a caseload of students, and really talking to that person about what the appeals process will be, because they can help then. They can help you ascertain what the path is, because one path may be that you need to write a something as simple as writing a letter requesting additional financial assistance and sort of what I called earlier the second look. But another may be, and this was a question in the chat that they asked me to repeat, your family situation is changing. There's a pending divorce, and you haven't yet filed the FAFSA, and you're looking for guidance on what does that process look like. So at Suffolk, we want to have a FAFSA on file. We'd like to have gone out with a financial aid offer before you appeal, but then we'll work with you and hold your hand through the appeal process, because what you would be trying to document is, in the example in the chat, a pending divorce, and a family situation that may no longer have two incomes, that may no longer have a single household. And so really, that conversation piece at the onset that Sherry mentioned, I can't agree with her enough and underscore, have that conversation. Financially, people are good people. They want to help students, they want to help families, and so by all means reach out. And what you'll find, if you haven't figured it out already, is one school may advise you differently from another, and so the appeal process may look a little different. And so relying on that relationship building and relying on that professional that you're working with at the school level is going to be really important to help you navigate this process.
That's great. And Alcira, can you talk to your process at Fitchburg State a little bit? Especially, we've gotten some questions about timing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with Ken and Sherry as well. Get to know your financial aid office and make that call initially when you have a circumstance that does come up. But at Fitchburg State, we have an appeal form just like Salem State, and our appeal form is already we actually, as of today, honestly, just posted it. So as soon as students receive their financial aid packages and they are reviewing that, if it's not enough, they have a question, they can certainly fill out that appeal form. Once we receive that, the counselor will review the record, and then reach out to the family if anything else is needed, in terms of a tax return or any other type of documentation that is needed to process the appeal. And then we will reach out to the student and the parents, if we have the parent information, with the outcome of that appeal. Generally for us, as long as all documents are in that are needed, we will turn around and appeal in about 7 to 10 business days.
That's great. So what I'm hearing, just to sum it up, because I know we had some questions, is reach out right away and have a conversation. You don't have to wait to do that. Have that as soon as you know something's going to be different, and get that FAFSA and get that profile. Schools like to have a financial aid offer out there so then they can work with that information. So from timing perspective, those are the two big starting points is give a call. Never hurts to call to find out. Conversations are great. And even, if you're on campus, sometimes colleges, especially this time of year, they might have an accepted students day and they might have a financial aid session or they might have financial aid staff on hand. I know that I'll be at Endicott. Well, actually, my colleague will be at Endicott. I'll be at Curry in April, and we'll be there just talking about payment options. But the financial aid office is there as well, and there you can ask some questions there. Set up a Zoom if you really want that face to face, and you can't make it to the school if it's in another state. But have the conversation, get started with that, and then just know that there's documentation you're going to need to fill out, paperwork. They're going to request a verification of any of forms, but start there. Anything I'm missing as far as timing to the panel? I think we're good with that. Okay, good. Great. Okay, so let's talk about afterwards. So they've submitted what they need. They've talked to you. They've gotten their documentation in. Then what happens for whether it's accepted and if it's not accepted, maybe just talk through some of the scenarios. I don't know who I was talking to last. I think Sherry, I think you're up next.
Yeah, so once we have all the documentation for the appeal, it takes, a week or two, and we will get a decision back to you, to the family, to the student and the parents. And then if you want to have a discussion about it, if it still isn't quite enough, we definitely would welcome another conversation to either let you know this is really the most that we can do, or maybe there's still more details that we can work out with you or more documentation that you can provide. So once we get down to this is the most that we can do, and here's the amount that you're going to have to pay, then the conversation would turn to how we can help you pay that amount. So we would go through different financing options. So we would talk to you about payment plans or private parent loans or private student loans. And we also like to talk at Brandeis about combining payment plans and private loans to get down to so that you don't borrow more than you need to. So we definitely see lots of families either do just a payment plan or just loans, but you can combine them to try to borrow as little as possible. And so we try to have those conversations here at Brandeis as much as possible to try and make sure you don't borrow too much. And we kind of start with how much do you think you can afford a month and try to back into how we can combine options for you to help you get to the number that you need.
Yeah, that combination strategy, that's always the question I start off with families. Okay, you owe this much. How much can you afford per month? And don't start with how we're going to pay. Let's start with what you can afford, and then we'll go from there. I'll talk more about that later. We have some programs coming up that can help. Kevin, do you have what do you have to add about, what happens next, what happens after?
So at Salem State, our goal is to reduce the student aid index, which is what we base our need-based, financial aid on. That being said, if we are unable to reduce the student aid index enough, we will look at the appeal to say, all right, the students living on campus, do we have any additional housing grant funds? So you may not meet the criteria to lower the student aid index, but we might have some funds that we can apply to help you get closer to where you need to be. And as Sherry said, after that, it becomes the conversation of payment plan, parent loans, external loans from private lenders. We do recommend don't put it on a credit card, because if you want to make monthly payments, go with a Parent Plus loan or even go with a private student loan, because the interest rate is going to be so much better than you're going to pay on a credit card. We highly recommend parents do not finance their child's education on a credit card. Unless you have a 0% interest one, then go for it. But student loans are your better bet, because there's some safety mechanisms built into them.
Unless you have the cash to pay it off right away and you're just doing it for the points, don't use a
Then
credit
by all means, but otherwise.
Ken, how do things work at Suffolk, once it's been submitted, and what do you guys talk to folks about?
So our process is very, very similar to Sherry's. The only thing that I would add is I think it's important for families to understand that no two families are going to approach how to pay for college in an identical way, right? Because no two financial aid offers are going to look exactly alike. No two families financially look exactly alike. No two households look exactly alike. And so the tailoring of a plan to pay down or pay off the gap between what aid covers and what the expense is going to vary from family to family. And that's where that relationship building that I talked about earlier, that contact with the financial aid office, that's where that comes into play all the more beyond the appeal process. It's, really backing into, okay, what's your plan? What was your family's plan for how you plan to finance college? And then exploring all of the options that are available beyond the appeal process. Now that the appeal process has been, sort of resolved, and tailoring a financing plan that is unique to each family.
Great, great. And one of the questions I get a lot from families is, well, how do most people do it? And I never answer that question directly. I always say it doesn't matter how others do it. It's what's going to work best for you. Because what works best for one family on the soccer field isn't necessarily what's going to work best for that family. That's great. 𝘒𝘯𝘰, what do you have anything to add as far as like after they've appealed and what happens next?
Yeah, one of the things that when we're reviewing a financial aid award for students, if we notice too that even before speaking about alternative loans, Parent Plus loans, if they haven't accepted their Stafford loans yet, to explain to them it's better to take a Stafford loan over that private loan, and that that will help reduce that balance if you haven't already accepted those.
Yeah, definitely start with the federal student loans first, always. And MEFA is a private lender, but we also make those recommendations. So for those of you who go ahead, Kev.
I just wanted to mention at Salem State, we do recommend and actually require, if you're going to appeal your financial aid, you have to have accepted all of your financial aid, including your federal direct loans. So you can't go in the system, decline your loans, and then file a financial aid appeal looking for additional grant money. So we do require students to utilize all the aid that's being offered to them at the time.
That's great. So while we're chatting with you, Kevin, since we're on you, before we keep going, I just want to address the merit question because we've had that in the chat as well. If you could each just talk about how the process works for merit aid appeals, real quick. You want to start, Kevin?
Sure. So our merit aid appeals basically would actually go through the admissions office because those students are then referred to the honors program, and most of our merit aid comes through the honors program. So if you're looking for additional merit aid from Salem State, you would actually do your outreach first to our admissions office, and they would put you in contact with our honors department.
𝘒𝘯𝘰, how about at Fitchburg State with any merit?
Yeah, ours is the same as Salem State. Any merit questions would go through our admissions office as well.
I think that's the same with most schools, but Sherry, Ken, I know you guys might have maybe.
Yeah, so our admissions office does determine all of the merit scholarships, but there is no appeal process on merit here at Brandeis. So it's a final decision by the admissions office. So then really the only thing you can appeal is the need-based financial aid.
That's really good to know. How about at Suffolk, Ken?
So we would shepherd that appeal for merit to the admissions office, and we'd look at it more holistically. So we would look at both, what the decision was, what's changed that they are asking for reconsideration for merit, and then we would look at need as part of a sort of holistic approach toward reviewing the student's request.
Great. So let's look into the future a little bit. For that four-year plan, families need to be thinking about that four-year plan at four-year schools. How do schools review appeals for future needs? So somebody says, oh, I might get laid off, or, right now I'm a federal employee and I might lose my job next month, or tomorrow. Who knows what's going to happen right now? How do you review appeals for stuff that might not have happened yet? Do you want to start, Ken, since I was chatting with you?
Sure. So that relationship that we talked about earlier, and sort of putting the bug in the ear of someone that works in the financial aid office about what your family's experiencing, what you're worried about. I think that's sort of the first step. It's to document what your concern is. So in your example, Stephanie, you said, I'm a federal employee. I'm not sure if I'm going to lose my job. Something that we see regularly is, well, last year I had lots of overtime, and this year I'm not sure I'm going to. We document that conversation, and then we ask for you to get in touch with us as soon as what we've been put on alert or anything else happens. And so we can't find ourselves in a situation with the overtime situation. We can't find ourselves in a situation where we reduce your income based on your projection that you're not going to get the overtime. We can do it after you've demonstrated that you haven't. We can't change your income to eliminate a salary because you're fearful of being laid off. We can look at that and calculating a new salary based on when you are actually notified. And so while I wish I had a crystal ball, and there's lots I could do with it, we really need to wait until the qualifying event happens, and then strategize with you on how to address that event in terms of reevaluating eligibility.
Awesome. Sherry, anything to add with that one?
Yeah, so we definitely get the same kinds of things that Ken gets, that, I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job, or my overtime's been eliminated. So while we can't do anything until it actually happens, like really change the aid, we have given estimates to people. So, hey, if you do lose your income, and let's say your income is 20,000 less, this is what the package would look like. And then we've also done with the overtime piece, or maybe they say they're not going to get the bonus this year. We ask them to document that they've been told it won't happen. And then we do change the aid based on the lower income. But then in December, we have them document what actually happened, so that we then would change the aid for spring if they ended up making more money than they thought, that maybe the bonus came through unexpectedly. So we make sure that they understand that they're going to have to document it. And so if something changes, they should let us know right away. But we will just document it, that it really came out the way that they planned.
That's great. That's great. Sarah, how about at Fitchburg State, looking into the future, and also just talking about that 4-year plan and making sure families know, when they're entering, if you're struggling to get through year 1, it's not going to get any easier years 2, 3, and 4. How do you advise families?
So we will do the same thing. Until that event happens, then at that point, contact us, let us know. But let us know in advance what the concern is. And then if it does happen, we will review the award again, and collect anything that's necessary for that. But I also like to remind families, or have them remember, that the FAFSA has to be completed every year. So and at that point, when we go to award every year, that's what's going to determine what the new financial aid award will be. And then when they receive it, again, review it, do the same thing. If there's any concern or you need to appeal, then follow up with us.
Great, thank you. And Kevin, what do you have?
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, if you look at it logistically, if you're filing an appeal because of a incident that happened, or decrease in income that happened a year or 2 years ago, by the time you've done your appeal for their freshman year, they're going into their second year, you're going to do the appeal again the second year, because the income is still not going to be reflected appropriately. By the third year, it's going to catch up. So everything's going to catch up, your taxes and the FAFSA year that you're filing. But if you are filing 1 year, you should expect to file an appeal the following year.
Excellent. So we are getting a few questions in the box about who should file the appeal. Should it be the parent, the student? Should the school counselor help out with this? Do you want to start with that one, Ken?
Yeah. So typically the parent is filing on behalf of their student and their family, but we have students that also file. And so it should be anybody that that the student has listed on their application for financial aid as part of the family unit and the income that we're basing financial aid eligibility on.
Any of the panel have anything different to add as far as who they want to hear from? Kevin?
I will add at Salem State, if you are filing an appeal, if you're the parent filing an appeal, please be sure that your student has added you to their FERPA list, because we know you're paying the bill, we know you're filling out the FAFSA, but we're limited in the information we can share with you unless we have a FERPA waiver on file.
Good point. Good point. Yep. Good point. Okay, awesome. All right. So, as part of that, I know this is slightly off topic, but I think it's important for school counselors to get involved. Panel, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Typically, we do see school counselors help out with students who might not have as much support at home, or they might be in a unique situation where, an abuse or, parents incarcerated or something's happening in the family where the student needs outside assistance. So I don't know if you guys can just quickly answer, just kind of address when school counselors typically might help students through this process. Sherry, do you want to start with that?
I can take that one. So we hear from the counselors generally, like when a student's trying to get information about one or both parents waived. They either want to be considered independent, or maybe, at Brandeis, we do require information from both biological parents. So maybe there's one parent that is out of the picture, or maybe there's an abuse situation, something like that. So we do require some third-party documentation of that situation. So typically a guidance counselor or therapist or clergy person or something is the person that gives us that third-party verification. So the high school counselors could definitely be helpful if they know the situation. It's not useful if they just say, the student told me this, but if they happen to know from their experience with the student that what they're saying is true, then absolutely they can help with that. Can't really help too much with appeals based on income or anything like that, but if we're needing them to corroborate a situation, definitely the high school counselors can help.
Yeah, and especially if one parent or another cannot be on the FAFSA, that can create a big change in the financial aid offer, and it can be a big help to the student. 𝘒𝘯𝑟𝑎, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I've actually had in the past counselors reach out with the student in their office, and that's how the conversation starts. And then from there, you can let them know or send out an email to the student after any documentation that's needed. For example, to make a student independent if there's a situation that can lead to that. So that type of situation is very helpful. And like what Sherry said, the counselor can write something on behalf of that student in an example to make the student independent if that's the way that that conversation is going to go. So absolutely.
Excellent. Kevin, Ken, do you guys have anything to add that might be a little different? No.
Same thing.
Okay. So I do want to get into how, the next steps as far as a little bit more about paying the bill, but I do have a loaded question that I get all the time at financial aid night. So I'm just going to throw it out there, and you can all respond however you want. The question I get at financial aid nights a lot is, well, what if you don't have a reason to appeal? You just want more money. Can you negotiate your financial aid offer? So who wants to go first? Ken? I see everybody's smiling. So whoever wants.
So there is nothing to stop you from submitting a request for a second look. That is not the same as negotiating your financial aid offer. You're asking for a second review. And depending on the school's policy, the school may take that second look, or they may tell you no. But there's nothing to stop you from asking the question.
Kevin?
Agreed. I mean, and it doesn't hurt. We actually recently, 2 weeks ago, we had a parent call in. They were really concerned about the aid that this incoming freshman was being offered. And we noticed there was a huge mistake that they had made on the FAFSA, which kind of blew them out of the water for any need-based aid. Once we discovered that, through the conversation with the parent, they're like, oh no, we don't have that much money in investments. Once we were able to fix that, the student was then eligible for a whole lot of need-based aid. But because there was a decimal place in the wrong place, it kind of took their eligibility completely off the table. So a simple conversation, can you take a look? I'm happy to look at a FAFSA for any parent or student that calls or comes in because mistakes happen. We want to make sure that you're getting the best financial aid package that we can offer you.
That's great. And Sherry, how about at Brandeis?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to starting with a conversation with our office because if we're on the phone with you, we're going to go over, like Kevin said, we're going to go over the whole application and maybe look for things, be like, okay, is your income really this? Is your assets maybe look a little off, and maybe we find a mistake that you made that we, couldn't pick up without talking to you. So it's useful to have that conversation or to ask for that second look so that we can go through it with you, kind of with a fine tooth comb to see if there are any errors. At Brandeis, you can't negotiate your financial aid package, and we meet 100% of financial need. So you have to have had a change in circumstance, or we have to discover that there was a mistake or something on the application in order to give you more aid. And we're also asked frequently, will you match what this other school gave me? And that we don't do at Brandeis. But I know there are other schools that do. So, I mean, I don't want to say don't ask. And like you said earlier, Stephanie, if you don't ask, you don't know. So,
Right, right. And Elsair, maybe you can address this too. You might have a family, kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier. They got a ton of money at Salem State, but nothing at Fitchburg, or I'm being drastic here, but
Yeah,
so I'm assuming you want to talk to them and kind of see, okay, what's going on, because you would expect them to be kind of similar.
true. That's very true. We will we have families that send us word letters from other schools. We will look, and the first thing is we will look at the ICER, the FAFSA information to see if there was a mistake there. First of all, or maybe they were working off a different. Maybe you made a correction in your FAFSA and we haven't received that yet either. So that would cause a different award package to go out, especially amongst some of the state schools. So yeah, there's for us, ask the question. And then worst case, it's going to be a no.
Yep. Doesn't never hurts to ask. And that's what I always tell families too. Like it doesn't hurt to ask, and it goes back to what we've been saying all along. Any financial aid officer will want you to understand how they came up with your award. And that might be all you need to know. Just understanding it might be enough. But with that said, I've definitely talked to plenty of schools, particularly more on the private side, that might not meet full need, where they've said, send them our way. We might not be able to do anything, but we might be able to send them a couple thousand in feel good money, they call it, just to make them feel a little bit better. But I guess, advice to families when you're talking about appeals, we don't use the word negotiating because most schools don't negotiate per se, but really focus your efforts on the schools that the student has been accepted to and really wants to go to. If you have 20 schools on the list, you don't need to appeal at every school. Appeal to the top few and put your efforts there. All right. So I have one more prepared question, and then we can dip into the Q&A, and Jennifer and Meredith can send us any other questions we have. Let's sort of round it out with, how do families make up the difference even when an appeal is granted? Now, I know, Sherry, at Brandeis, you guys meet 100% of need, but families still have to pay their SAI. So, and we talked about the combination strategy. Anything else you want to add about, how do they make up the difference?
yeah, I mean, it's really just figuring out what works for that particular family. I mean, coming up with the family contribution is looking at what they can cover from current income, current savings, and what they can absorb over time. So we'll talk about that with each family individually to try and figure out what might work best for them.
Great. Any other strategies, Ken, on the private side?
Yeah, just piggybacking Sherry's comments. It's what I said earlier. No two families are going to approach this the exact same way. Some families may have a 529 plan. Some families may have college savings. Some families may have an ability to pay all of the gap between aid and cost over a monthly payment plan, or they'll need to use the monthly payment plan to pay a portion of that gap, and then they might want to borrow the rest. Some families won't be able to afford any of that and need to borrow all of it. The point is no two families are going to approach this exactly the same. They need to work with a financial aid counselor, put a plan together, and that plan is very individualized based on how the family has chosen to approach paying for college.
Great. Kevin, do you have anything to add?
I just like to remind parents that yes, freshman year, your student is all gung ho, you're gung ho. You're like, all right, we're going to pay the difference in a loan. We're just going to borrow $20,000. You're not borrowing $20,000. You are borrowing $20,000 for that year. So you have to look at the big picture. You're actually borrowing $80,000 to $100,000 over the 4 to 5 years. Salem State, our students tend to graduate in 5 years. Very few leave after 4. So you're borrowing $20,000 for 4 to 5 years to meet that gap.
Yep.
So just kind of keep that in mind, that it's not just a 1-year commitment, it is multiple years.
Yep, that 4-year plan. 𝘒𝘯𝘰, anything to add here?
Yeah, and I think I always remind families as well that don't just think about the 4 years, the undergraduate. If you want to go on to graduate school, you want to think about that and know that for graduate school, a lot of places it's just going to be loan only. So if you can reduce your borrowing at all during the 4-year program, then that's something that you need to have a discussion about, as a lot of people say, the kitchen table, the dinner table, before school starts, and know what's the next 4, maybe 6 years are gonna look like for your family.
Right. And when we talk about borrowing for the freshman year loan in the student's name, the Federal Direct Stafford loan, that's $5,500 for a freshman. If you owe $20,000, like Kevin was saying, the student can't borrow $15,000 more on their own without a creditworthy cosigner. Even with MEFA, we have really low rates, we have good programs, but it's a family loan. Creditworthy cosigner, usually a parent and student, are on that loan. So it always surprises folks at this stage in the game when they're looking at paying the bill that, geez, the student can't just borrow $20,000, $30,000 a year on their own. There are limits there. So, all right, awesome. Well, I know we have a few more questions coming in, but let me just get back to our little slideshow and sort of wrap things up here real quick. And we'll let folks come in and ask some questions. All right. So I do want to put these slides up just so you know there's more help beyond today. So today we really focus specifically on appeals. But at MEFA, we have lots of programs like this one where we talk through how financial aid is calculated, how to fill out the CSS profile. But we have a few coming up that are perfect for all of you that are on the line today. And you can scan these QR codes and register. I'm going to send these slides out to everybody. But I just want you to know what we have for services at MEFA. And all of these questions you have, we can help you with one-on-one assistance if you need it. So we have these spring programs coming up called Financial Aid Offers and Paying the College Bill, where we will literally walk you through our tools that help you plug in your financial aid offers and compare them side by side and understand which each college is giving you and what your bottom line is at each school. And then we can help you figure out, okay, you owe $20,000. What can you afford per month? How much do you have saved? We can help you at MEFA figure that out. We're experts at that. That's what we do. We have one-on-one hotlines that we're going to have some really trying something new this year. We're going to have 2 hotlines in March that you can sign up for, where you can log into a Zoom like this. It's really more of a meeting, and you'll be placed in a private Zoom room with one of us, and you can share your screen, share your financial aid offers, and we can share our screen with our tools that we have on our end, and it's really like a one-on-one counseling session. So there's a hotline for that we're going to have coming up, or you can just email MEFA and we can set up a one-on-one appointment. And then in June, sort of the last step, once you've committed, you know where the student's going, then we can help you with comparing loan options. So MEFA is a private lender. We have really low rates because we're a state-based lender. But we're not, that's not the only option. There's federal loans, there's payment plans. I always start with, how much have you saved? Let's look at that first. Who else wants to contribute? Does grandma or grandpa have a little money set aside? Figure out where all that money is first, then look at how much can you afford per month. If the amount is zero, then we might be looking at just straight deferred option, loans. But if it's, $500 a month, then maybe we can put a few $100s on a payment plan a month and then the rest on a loan. And we have great calculators at MEFA that can show you just how much you're saving by borrowing 13,000 versus 15,000. It can really add up that interest just by borrowing a little bit less and putting on a payment plan. So take advantage of the resources that MEFA has. It's everything we do is free of charge. If you're on this webinar, you should be on MEFA's email curriculum already. But we have a great podcast. If you like podcasts, I had a parent call this morning with financial aid questions and said, "Oh, I love your podcast." Everybody likes to consume information different ways, whether it's a webinar, a podcast, or an Instagram post that you can click in. Whatever works for you, we have all of that as well as our videos on YouTube. And here's our 800 number and our email address. MEFA is open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We're open a little bit later in the summer till 6 Eastern time. So reach out to us. All these questions that you're asking to Jennifer and Meredith that they're answering behind the scenes, you can call MEFA and we're all on the phones. We can answer them. So use that free service. We're here to help. So with that, let's see, I'll throw it out to Jennifer and Meredith. Is there any last minute questions that we want to throw out to the whole group?
Let's see.
Any good ones that we want to?
We have answered most. These have been great questions.
Yes, they've kept us busy.
Yeah, and our panel has answered a lot of the main ones. I'm just seeing if there's any more that are coming in these last few seconds here.
Yeah, I think it's mostly, about loans. I'm seeing a few comments there. There is one question about where this recording will be posted. So you're going to get an email probably tomorrow, and it will have a link to this recording. It will be a YouTube, video, and it will have these slides with the QR code. So we'll have that as well. So we will have everything out to everybody. All right. So this is great. Thank you so much, Ken, Sherry, Kevin, Elcira, Meredith, Jennifer, going through my family family feud squares here. This is great appeals webinar. We're going to do this every year. Hopefully it helps folks. I think the big message is call the financial aid office, have a conversation. That's where we always want to start. So, all right. Well, with that, I think we're good to end the webinar. Thank you everybody for joining us, and we will see you at the next one. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.